Now you're going to first remove the caliper bolts from the pins, and then the caliper mounting bolts, one here, one right there, and the other caliper bolt is obviously on the bottom of the caliper. Mounting bolt is a 15 millimeter and the caliper bolt is a 13 millimeter. Hang the caliper up on the spring for now. I'm just using a coat hanger here. This will have to be moved later because the spring's going to be coming out, but for now it could stay. Not toast yet, but I'm gonna replace them anyway because the rotor is grooved and yeah, the rotor needs to go. Well, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this ABS wire. So forget. Now I'm gonna spray these. The other side does not spin, so you need to spray the nuts. And I found it easiest to leave the tie rod in place. So I'm gonna spray the ball joint. And spray the 3 nuts up here, the strut tower. Also, I'm using Monroe quick struts and they do not come with new brackets for these. I don't know if any other brand does. But for the ABS wire and the brake hose, you gotta save the bracket, so I'll lubricate those bolts as well. The last one you'll need to do is shoot this one. And you don't need to do the one through the bushing on this side because it's actually held on by these. Now these weren't rusted on mine, but I'm gonna spray them anyway. And that is all for now. This side might be a bit more challenging to get out than the driver's side because as you can see the brake lines run right over top of those, so that'll be fun. Forgot to mention the stabilizer link also has to come out to do the control arm, so I will spray that now. Let it soak. The first step in removal is to remove these 3. Using a 3/8 up here because for the last one it is much more difficult to fit a 1/2 inch drive in there. I was able to get these 2 loose using my impact. This one, the nut on the bottom is spinning, and because 330,000 kilometers on original struts, there is no possible way I can get a nut on that. Also the spring is in the way, so I don't know how you're supposed to do it anyway. So I'm going to drill this one out. Start it off by making a 3/16 pilot hole. And I'm going to drill through it within 11/32, which is slightly undersized. Which is good because I don't want to drill up the sides of the strut tower. If it's still stuck on by a couple threads, I could just break it loose underneath. Okay, so I got these 2 still loose. Mostly drilled through this one. I think it's down to the point where we can break it free from underneath. Gonna leave that for now. We're gonna take these 2 nuts off. Then we're gonna take the stabilizer link off and drop the control arm and hopefully pull out the strut. Okay, got these 2 loose using a pipe. I used a 15/16 socket. I think they're actually a 24 millimeter, but I don't have one. But this fits nice and tight on there, so it worked. Now I'm going to tap them through with a hammer. Leave the nut on so you don't damage the threads on the bolts. Okay, gonna lube the axle nut. Got these taken off. Mostly, we'll just tap this end lightly with a hammer not to damage the threads, and these will pop out easily now. These are have grooves on them, so do not try and take them off from this side or you will damage them and you will probably break your breaker bar also. Axle nut is a 33 millimeter. And this impact gun should get it off with ease. No problem. Okay, taking the stabilizer link off, this top nut was a 16 millimeter, bottom one was a 14. You have to hold the bottom with a wrench, and I used a socket on the top. And it's spinning. Well, you get the idea. It'll come off. Okay, got the ball joint loose. Basically, I used this chisel in between here and the axle, jacked the control arm up, and made sure that this chisel was in there tight, and then let the jack down as fast as I could. And you hear a loud pop when this ball joint will come free. I'll leave a link to the video I learned that from in the description. Okay, now I'm going to take out these two screws, save these brackets, just leave them hanging. And this one's a little bit stuck in there. I got that one off camera, but it's the same deal. Okay, I already got this one off with ease. Now I'm going to take this one off. Quick struts come with new mounting bolts, so I don't need to reuse those. And let's hope this comes right off just like that. Nice. And I forgot to undo the caliper from it. Well, that came off beautifully. Okay, I got these two bolts loose right here. So I went underneath the car, used an impact. It's an 18 millimeter on both sides. And I had my dad hold a 18 millimeter ratchet on a 3/8 because it couldn't fit a 1/2 inch below this. 18 mil on a 3/8, held it on here in place while I impacted it off. Okay, this one's the easy one. The nut on the other side here has a washer on it that doesn't allow it to spin, so you don't need to hold it. It's just an 18 mil socket. I put a bar on it. And this should come off easy. There you go. Control arm's out. Shock and strut is out. I left the tie rod attached because I find this the easiest way, and don't have a tie rod separator. It doesn't need to come out as long as the ball joint comes out. No suspension left. Time to reassemble. Okay, I put the strut in. 3 bolts on top are holding it in place. They're just hand tight, pretty loose. And I just slid this bolt in here. The nut and washer goes on this side. And then these 2 bolts go up through the bottom on this side. Right up through there. And then they get secured by these 2 nuts. Make sure it's the ones with this washer on the bottom. See that? Okay, so on the new control arm, you're gonna have to tighten up this bolt in the bushing. Again, using a 15/16 on this side. The other side, I don't have a second socket. It's the same size, so I got a pair of vice grips on there. Okay, control arm is all mounted up. For these bolts, this one here holding this on, get at it from right here, nut on this side, and this one over here, the 2 on the bushing. You don't want to tighten them up too much. What I like to do for all my control arms is just, well, I got the caliper on there now, but move that out of the way, lift it up, and then just keep it tight so that just this slight amount of pressure will push it down. You don't want it to be going down on its own or it's too loose. You don't want to have to be forcing down on it or it's too tight. Okay, got the ball joint mounted back up down here. Gonna have to put the nut on it though. Tie rod's still in place. Gonna connect this now. Now this was the most difficult part on doing the driver's side, was lining this back up. What I found was the most effective method was to jack up the control arm. I put the top bolt in first and jacked up the control arm, and the bottom one just lined up perfectly. Hopefully it works just as well on this side. Okay, so what I ended up doing is I put the bottom bolt in first and I jacked it up right from the wheel hub, and that pretty much got the top hole perfectly lined up. So then I drove the stud in through this end and I got both nuts on. Pretty much ready to put the brake rotor back on now and the caliper. Okay, strut tower bolts are all tightened, 44 foot-pounds up here. These are tightened, I believe, 136. Ball joint was tightened, can't remember the torque spec. Everything's good, just need to put the new rotor on, new pads on, bolt the caliper on, and we are good to put the wheel on after that. Control arm has been tightened as well. Okay, all done here, just got to put the wheel back on. This is not a video about brakes, but put a new brake rotor and new pads on. Calipers bolted back up. These are torqued, stabilizer links back on now. This has been torqued to 118 foot-pounds, or I think it's 160 something Newton meters. And everything is good to go.